There's always been a debate among businesses as to how their buyers buy, right? Business to business or B2B and business to consumer, B2C. A business purchase is very different from a consumer purchase, but there has been a study done that breaks the thought that B2B marketers shouldn't pay any attention to what the B2C marketing trends dictate. We're actually talking to Mathew Sweezey of Salesforce. He has a solid insight into this research. So thanks for joining us, Mathew. How are you doing today?
Doing good, man. It's a great day down here in Charleston.
Charleston,
Charleston, nice. Yeah. We're supposed to get an ice storm this weekend, Matthew.
Yeah, here in Indianapolis, Indiana, we literally went from 16 degrees to 63 in a span of like 2 days.
Yeah, we woke up this morning, and the high was, I asked my Google Home this morning, and the temperature was 61 degrees, and they said by the time I get home, it'll be 40, in the 40s.
Yeah, it already is. Oh, unbelievable. So do you have those wild fluctuations in North Carolina like we do?
Yeah. All the South is crazy weather like that. We don't get that cold down to 16. I mean, if it's 30, we're freezing. We're not thick-skinned down here.
Got it. It's a beautiful place. I've been down there before. It's wonderful to see. Well, we're talking to Mathew Sweezey, and he's a principal of marketing insights at Salesforce.com, and recently wrote Marketing Automation for Dummies, published on Wiley. He's also a market researcher, and his job entails being a market researcher and theorist focused on the future of marketing. He works with brands, technology vendors, research institutions, and consumers to understand the effects of the modern media environment on what we call "quote unquote" marketing. And now, Mathew, you do a lot of speaking, and you said in our pre-show questionnaire you talk around 50 times a year around the world. That's a lot of travel and a lot of talking.
Yeah. It's not glamorous or fun, despite what people think.
Oh, come on.
I love my job. Don't ever take that as I don't love my job. I love my job. Yeah, it's a lot of speaking, but I really love what I do. So I have the ability to work with pretty much anyone and everyone. So I get to work with some of the world's biggest brands. I get to work with government agencies. I get to work with militaries. I get to work with the coolest technology that's out there, the most progressive marketers that are out there, and as well as behavioral research. So I do a lot of work with, research scientists, whether that be professors at Harvard or at UCLA or other types of folks, to really kind of to ask questions that necessarily aren't being asked because they're not necessarily great lead generation questions. Is pretty much an easy way to look at it. So, for what I look at is there's a lot of research being done. Typically, the research that's done is usually self-fulfilling, right? We usually typically do research that supports the products that we create. Hence, that's where the content is getting created from that. And that's the justification for that research. I kind of go in a different directive. I kind of go and look at bigger questions and say, well, what if we look at these things in a different way and then go follow those paths? So that's kind of what I talk about and what I write about, and I really love it. So
excellent.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, absolutely. And we've been watching you from afar, and don't be creeped out. I mean, we're digital marketing stalkers. Some of the brands you worked with: Home Depot, UPS, the Canadian Armed Forces, NATO, AT&T, Dell, Cardinal Healthcare, NetJets. Now, those are some pretty hefty brands there.
Yeah, those are some cool people.
You're also a contributing writer over at Convince and Convert, Jay Baer's blog, as well as Clicks.com. And you this traveling that you do and speaking, you've been a keynote speaker for Smash. I'm telling him like he doesn't know.
Did you know that you did
this? But to our listeners, he's been a keynote speaker at Smash, Content Marketing World, SugarCon, Exact Target Connections, Marketing Innovations Summit, just to name a few. So we're very
SugarCon. I haven't heard of that one before.
Yeah, it was a Sugar CRM conference. That was obviously before my days at Salesforce had bought Exact Target. So
I was wondering if you were cheating on Salesforce there.
No, definitely don't cheat.
SugarCon sounds like a dessert conference and something I'd be interested in going to.
I'm just going to let that sit.
Yeah, I think that could be fun. I think I'd go to that too.
Well, Matt, you're a busy person. Share with us, what does a day in the life of Matt Sweezey look like?
Day in the life isn't that exciting right now. I'm writing a new book, so it's pretty much just pounding the keyboard all day and trying to get past roadblocks of writer's block. But that's about it. I mean, that's my day in the life. I mean, some of the more fun things are really some of the articles and some of the topics I've been able to work on recently. So one of the big things I've been working on is I help with a lot of the research efforts that we do at Salesforce. So I'm more or less an advisor to the marketing research that gets done. We have a whole research team that kind of puts together the surveys, statistical analysis, make beautiful, pieces of content, as we use the terminology out there.
Right.
But really, these are much larger reaching assets that we're able to create. And so there was one that we did recently that was looking at the idea of this, real-time interaction. Essentially, what I really like to play with is, some people call it like behavioral economics, but more or less like, how does the environment shift our behaviors of how we do things? Mm-hmm. And the most important thing I think we need to think about, and this is the thing I pretty much think about on a day-to-day basis, is really, how does this modern media environment change what I call the decision-making process? Right. And that's really what this article is about, that I published in Convince and Convert. And Jay's great to let me write for him. I mean,
he's a great guy. He really is.
But yeah, he's super nice. Hardest working. He's the James Brown of the marketing world. He's the hardest working man in content marketing.
That's all. You better believe it. You better believe it.
People may not realize of how hard of a worker that man is. Anywho, so in this research we did, it's called the State of the Connected Customer. Really what it looks to find out is, do B2B buyers perceive their buying decisions on some of the same things that consumer buyers purchase or make their purchasing decisions on? Right. And the answer is actually they're more critical of some aspects than you would believe. One of those is actually they expect companies to respond to them in real time. So let me give you an example. So a B2B buyer, if you were to ask 100 of them, 80 of them would say they expect their business contacts to engage with them in real time. And when they're going through, looking at content and wanting to talk to salespeople, they expect real time 80%.
So define to us, consumer. I'm sorry, keep on going. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then consumers only expect companies to respond, interact with them in real time 64% of the time.
Okay,
so almost 50% of the time greater.
Wow.
Business buyers expect real-time interaction with the brands that they're engaging with.
So let's talk about
that would kind of go into the face. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's talk about real-time as a definition for our listeners.
Yeah, so real-time in a definition, I think, really needs to be understood as, just think about any interaction that exists online. Any interaction is dynamic now, and they pop up instantaneously.
Right.
So real-time could be, for a B2B scenario, you go onto a website. In real time, does somebody pop up with a chat box to engage with you? Does somebody pick up the telephone and call you because you have expressed or exhibited some type of, i.e. what we put air quotes, sales-ready behavior?
Right.
If you were engaging with a product and having some type of problem, are they able to identify that and instantly fix that in real time, with whether that be logging a support ticket, notifying you by email of that, doing any various things? It's a massive world of what real time means. I just think the fact is that most businesses don't realize that their constituents expect at a greater degree to be engaged with in real time than a consumer would. And I think that's kind of an eye-opening thing. Because in the B2B industry.
Yeah, the stigma, or I don't say stigma, but the common thought, and we hear that as marketers and as a marketing agency, we are always hearing. In fact, I was just talking to a business yesterday. Yeah, we don't really need to be inside of social media. Sure. None of our industry and none of our consumers, and anybody who buys from us, would never be inside social media as an example of a real time opportunity.
Oh my God!
And that's such a dated concept.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if your customers are talking to each other.
Ignorant. Yeah. So
there it is.
Let me tackle this real quick. So
hit it.
I mean, this is a whole chapter. So I've got a new book coming out. Harvard's going to be publishing my next book, and it'll come out in 2018. And especially in this book, I challenge the very foundations of marketing. It's essentially the subtitle of the book.
Very good.
And so in there, there's an entire chapter on this. And one of the things I don't think, first off, I'm going to lay out two beefs I've got with marketers. The first beef is marketers, in my opinion, don't read enough and don't understand a lot of the foundations of the things they do. Case in point, if you ask someone if they do content marketing and they say yes, but you ask them, have they read Seth Godin's permission-based marketing? And
There
they
it
say
is.
no, then I would argue they have no clue for the foundations of what they're doing. And one really simple example, right? The next would be saying, if you are a marketer and you do public relations, can you tell me who Edward Bernays is? And if they can't, they have no clue why the profession was created, or the fact that Edward Bernays' uncle was Sigmund Freud, and that's why we have the relating of inner desires to products. That's where that thought comes from. So first off,
those are basic, and those are basic concepts. And what you're saying is that there's a lot of marketers who have stepped over those preliminary foundational documents and understandings.
Exactly right. They do the things because people told them to, without understanding why they're doing it in the first place.
Yep, sure.
And so that go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I think this kind of is more true for digital marketers, because a lot of people coming to digital marketing don't really come from a marketing background.
Correct.
They have different professions, and they kind of just led into that digital marketing field.
Yeah, and especially in B2B, our industry, not to talk derogatory about our industry, but a lot of B2B marketers didn't start out their careers wanting to be marketers. I wanted to be a marketer. I went to school and had like a quasi minor in marketing. And at the time, I was in the age when, B2B was a death nail of your creative career, right? You were going to be stuck making ads for machinery products and trade publications, and no part of that is sexy. Very different from what we do now and what B2B marketing is now. Completely different. But that's the way it was when we were in school. So anyways, moving forward, this idea that their demographic isn't affected. So I'm to the audience that's listening, not to you guys. So the audience is listening. There's a guy named Marshall McLuhan who you should check out. He's known as Canada's greatest thinker. That is actually his moniker. And so this guy was a media theorist, and he started writing about the mobility of media in the 1950s. Right? Television hadn't even reached mass adoption inside the United States, yet this guy is talking about the mobility of media and how that's going to change society. So he wrote one of his, there's a lot of great books he wrote, but one's called Gutenberg Galaxy. And essentially the point of this book is to help people understand that when media environments change, the entire society itself changes.
Absolutely.
Because the media is the conductive fluid in between interactions, relationships, and especially for us, commerce, right? So we need to think about when media environments change. Now, the notion that the media environments, they may say, oh, yes, we know social media has changed things, but it hasn't changed my demographic. So here's the breakdown. This is the argument I have for that. First off, if you look at Pew Charitable Research studies and you look at the adoption rate of any media technology, in my research, what I found is if you look at the past 4 major evolutions of media, I think that would be like radio, television, internet, and then social media.
Right.
Each one was adopted in half the time of the previous one. Right. So to get to 75% of saturation in the United States, each one was done so in half the time of the prior. It's the same reason Moore's law exists in supercomputer. And,
I was about to ask if that was a parallel there. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's totally this is the same logic of thinking, right? If you have technology that can allow you to move faster, you then learn to do things different ways and have a greater appetite for the things that come after it. So that's my idea of the behavioral economic aspect. So anyway, so put that in perspective. Right now, we're looking at about 76 or 74% of the entire U.S. population.
Right.
Most of what we would call B2B buyer population is around 80% or higher penetration rate of social media. So that still leaves a gap for someone to say, my demographic is that 20% and they're not affected. Right. So here's my argument back to that, right? If you were to take the two extremes of what we would call the non or unaffected demographic, you're going to see two sides. One, you're going to say, my buyers are either too sophisticated to be influenced by those measures. And so you're going to say, those are going to be my executives. Those are going to be my people buying, let's say really expensive things that are highly considered purchases that are very technical.
Right.
That's one aspect. That's the too sophisticated. The not sophisticated enough would be the other extreme. And that would we'd say, let's think about very unsophisticated, skilled labor, manual labor, which we really then kind of get into essentially around the trades, right? Well, if you take both of those extremes and you combine them together, you get one specific buyer demographic. And that buyer demographic would be the people that are buying large equipment. It's a very expensive product. It's a very long considered purchase. We're talking about minimum of $300,000 to millions of dollars, not to mention if you buy multiple of those, you're in the multiples of millions. Right? They're also for the construction industry. So a lot of the users are going to be in those manual labor and trades jobs that we just said that, probably aren't affected. Now, if you look at that one core demographic and you look at two companies that sell to that core demographic, Caterpillar being one and Volvo Construction being two, you see their use of social media extremely powerful in providing massive revenue dividends to those bottom lines. So first off, you've got Caterpillar, who launched the social media campaign Built For It, which is one of my all-time favorite B2B use cases, in which they go and they play a giant game of Jenga with their equipment.
Yeah,
and they end up
I remember that video. Absolutely.
And now I think it's like 3.5 million people or views on that. And then you say, oh, that's cool, they got views, but what's the tie to the bottom line? And then you look at Volvo Construction, who says Facebook is their number one lead generation source and helps them sell over $100 million worth of both new and used equipment every year to that demographic, who we would say is that 20% that's not affected. So that's case in point number one, is I don't think people realize. Case in point number two is I doubt the person saying that has ever actually asked their audience where they are.
Exactly.
So
it's a judgment call, and there's a preconception that's just, it's laden with falsehoods and fallacies, and that's it's really where maybe they've come from, that particular decision maker in their journeys. And forgive me, I just want to interject. So many times the C-level that's saying these things, they are expecting that their consumers adopt the same behavior patterns that they have. Well, how foolish is that to actually believe that everyone everybody who's buying your product literally adopts the same type of social behavior that you have? I just don't understand how you can have that type of rationale. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The only way that you can support that rationale is the things that we used to do have worked forever, and they will continue to work. They're the foundations of marketing, and as long as we adhere to those, and that's why I'm writing this book, which is essentially saying, if you adhere to all of those things that you were taught, that we learned in school, and you leave those as foundations in your business as the foundations of marketing, you will fail completely, 110%. Because every one of those foundations was created for a limited media environment. Now, let me explain what this is. A limited media environment was any point in time before March 22nd in 2007. Up to that point in time in history, the majority of all media and all noise was dominated by businesses. That was for one simple fact. It was limited. It was limited in creation, limited in distribution, and limited in consumption. Past that day in 2007, we entered what I call the infinite environment, where there are no barriers for people to create, consume, or distribute. There's not even barriers for things to create, consume, and distribute, right? I think we fail to realize that if we're trying to break through this noise, what the noise actually is made of, and it's not made of the same things that it was back in the day when we created those practices. I'm giving half of my book away in this talk, but think about public relations. Let's just take this one foundation of marketing, public relations, and let's just demolish it, right? And if you demolish it, it's really easy, because if you actually read any of Edward Bernays' books, which I hope you guys do, one's called Crystallizing Public Opinion. If you read that book, in there, Edward Bernays specifically states, he says, this idea works because people like media and the ways that they're natively consuming it. They like ideas coming that way. And they accept these ideas when there is not the ability or inclination to go elsewhere for these answers or for that question. So what he's saying is, when there is no other way to ask the question, they will take what they are given.
Got it.
We don't live in that world. So if he even states that this practice works because it's a limited media environment, the moment the world enters the infinite environment and questions are free, easy, ubiquitous, and you get trusted answers in 0.38 seconds,
right,
that idea of that being a core foundation goes away, because people make decisions differently. They use the media differently. And that's the whole idea of when I talk about media environment shifting decision-making models and shifting the foundations. We have to be responsive to that model. We can't say, oh, we have public relations and now this thing, social media, exists. So how do I make public relations work on social media?
It's a whole different.
You have to say it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, it's a whole different construct, and now you're in a space where their B2C behavior now instructs their B2B behavior. And that's the one thing, the models of a B2B consumer, they're still social animals, and they're still inside the immediacy, the immediate pursuit of gratification to a particular degree from trained consumer behavior. They're a B2C individual as well as a B2B individual, and if they're seeing the B2C response there, naturally they're going to go to expect it from the B2B community, right?
Yeah, and we call that heuristics.
Got it. Yep.
Right. So heuristics is learning by doing, and I don't think people realize the heuristic nature or how pervasive this environment that we live in is on us. And here's one of my favorite questions to ask people to kind of prove this point. So let me ask you guys this question, everybody else that's listening.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, do you do A or do you do B? So when you get up and you check your email inbox, I don't care what device, how you do it, do you do A or do you do B? Do you open up the first email that you see, start to scan it, decide to continue scanning it or delete it, go to the next one in line, open it, start to scan it, decide to continue reading it or delete it, or do you do B? You just scan that email inbox, delete all the crap right away, and then go back through and work on the rest.
Absolutely, that would be B for me. And I'll own the fact that I got like 184,000 emails in my inbox. But I'll scan. But even to the degree, I'll actually scan just what's on that first 50 listings, and the drop off rate of going to the 50 app earlier. It's abysmal. Literally, I'm just front of mind, top of mind, and except for my clients, who I'll always respond to immediately as soon as I actually get their email. But I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Is that it's a learned behavior there?
It's a learned behavior completely. No one taught you how to use the email.
Right.
You taught yourself. Now, if you even dig into this one step further, what have you taught yourself to do? And this is the amazing part. You've taught yourself to identify and now be very specific on what you're looking at. You're looking at about 150 characters and a sender ID. That is all the information you have.
Correct.
To be able to determine the contents of this. Are they, one, authentic? Do I need to read them? All of that is based off of that.
You're making a judgment
now the
call
thing
right
I'm
there.
going to go back to is, how are you so good at identifying the crap? And that is because marketers make it so easy to identify. Right? We write like we've been trained to write as direct marketers. And when you read a subject line like that, you can easily tell who is a direct marketer, who is wanting to do something that you don't want to do versus who is a real person wanting to have a real conversation.
Absolutely.
It's so easy. And everyone around the world acts the exact same way. Now, that's the heuristic nature of this media environment, what it changes to do. And to your point, the B2C consumer is the B2B consumer is completely correct. Their experiences in the B2C world, they know what is now possible, and they expect the same things to happen in the B2B world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So just by the nature of the consumption activities, business to business has to be in that space. And it's foolish to think that you have, still have time to be in your old concepts. I mean, you have to adopt that. And I mean, to your point in the article and what you're writing on the book is that there's a level of expectation that's even more paramount than what the B2C consumers are looking for. That immediacy, that's actually jumping ahead into I guess from the behavior model. It's jumping ahead into another level of expectation and increased potential frustration if that B2B marketing channel or that brand doesn't respond, because the business shopper knows how valuable the communication is that they're sending you.
Right. Now, don't misread this statement. I'm not telling you guys. I'm referring to the people listening. Don't misread or misunderstand what we're saying here. It's not that every interaction has to be fast. Yes, it has to be fast. But it has to be fast because speed is a value that they've been taught to expect. Right. So that's a heuristic nature of the media. It's taught us that speed is possible. The second thing is that what we're really seeing here is this is a point that points to the idea that marketing really is the owner of the experience and has to be across all touch points.
Yes.
Right. When we talk about what is immediacy and what is the experience and where are the touch points, I mean, you start going through any department, and any department now has multiple touch points for the consumer. Right. If those touch points aren't all driven in the same direction and based on and having the same foundational aspects, such as do they all value speed? Do they all value humanity? Do they all value whatever your values may be, then they can't operate what I would say holistically or consistently. And then you start running into problems where then marketing is going to be pulled back in and say, hey, go fix this problem, rather than what if we looked at the problem in a different way and say marketing's job isn't to make pretty pictures to solve problems.
Right.
Marketing's job is to make sure that we as an organization create the best possible experience for our consumers, prospects, leads, whatever the term you might want to use. I mean, that's really kind of where the modern marketer has to go.
You have to man the turrets. You man those touch points, and also exceed that customer's expectation. But this correlates to I think it's the MIT study that I quote that was several years ago, that they were testing 1,500 different businesses, and they saw such a conversion optimization rate in if consumers or businesses respond.
The Harvard study.
Yeah, the Harvard study. Yeah, if they responded to a form fill within the first 5 minutes, they had like a 398% a conversion from prospect to lead opportunity in that first 5 minutes, and it dropped down to 30% within the hour. What a hockey stick! The hockey stick of conversion shows us that we are in an immediate space, and the consumers that are actually getting delivered that response from a business, and the study also showed that even the price didn't really matter. Actually, whenever they were seeing that type of response, they would opt to choose possibly for the larger priced particular product, as opposed to what commonly is thought that people are just shopping for the best price. They were shopping and wanting to see loyalty. If that response came through quick enough and personalized, that's one of the other points in your article there. They're more apt to choose that particular business. So that's your real-time immediacy type of response that you're referring to, correct?
Correct, yes.
Wow. So I get goosebumps whenever because I actually tell this to our customers or to our clients. You've got to be on those emails. You have to stop everything and respond. Otherwise, you get into negative brand space within a 4-hour, 5-hour time frame.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also, I think there's a lot of marketers. Here's the problem. If your business is more than, I'd say, 3 to 5 years old,
right,
and you're not a marketer, you're not a marketing company, you probably don't realize the level of technology that you have to have, right? So I think one of the big problems we have a lot of people is they say, oh, back in the day, i.e. like 5 to 10 years ago,
right, all
I needed to have was a person that could send out some emails and manage my website. That meant I had to have a website. That meant I had to have an email tool. Both of those things very inexpensive. The person's time was the most expensive thing. Now you move forward and you realize how fast all these interactions have to take place, how many different bits of data have to be connected so that you can then have an omni-channel experience across any touch point.
Right.
You start looking at all these different things that are required. The base level technology set is very high. And then there's lots of different ways to create it and varying budgets to create it with, but you have to have a completely new set of technology to be able to do these things in the modern world, because you have to. You don't have an option. Consumers demand it, and I think that's the difference. Is a lot of people don't realize that this is the baseline set by consumers. It's not us and other marketing pundits saying, hey, it'd be great if you could do this. It's consumers saying, if you don't do this, fuck off, man. You're lost.
Exactly. Well, my question to you, Mathew, is, I mean, you've been seeing the evolution, and I mean, and the adoption of all of these mediums are half as much as the previous adoption, like you mentioned. As we're still careening. I don't want to say out of control. There is a convergence of a heck of a lot of media saturation and real-time expectation. What do you see as a plateau point for not just B2C and B2B respectively, but do you see a pushback where consumers or businesses, for that matter, will just accept, okay, this is enough interaction? Or are we going to see a continued connection to real time and so many more additional touch points based on new platforms and new engagements. What would be your predictions there? Because there certainly has been just a crescendo happening, right?
Yes, that's a great question. I think the only way to answer that is I don't think. Here's my prediction, and here's what's going to happen. Right. So first off, we have to realize that let's just go back. Let's just look at the trends. And so if you start looking at every media trend since 1900 and you start looking at the amount of noise, there's a big graph I do in my book. But essentially what you see is each time a new media technology enters the marketplace, there's a giant bump in terms of total noise. And then there's a plateau. Now, that only is true with what I call non-permissioned noise, which means that there is no permission given to reach the person, i.e., you didn't give them your email address. I'm talking about radio, television, mass media metrics.
Right.
What that says is when it hits the plateau, there is a total cap that the market is willing to accept. They would have gone past that if they would have seen gains received from that, but they didn't. We then enter the world of permission noise, right? Which is essentially, you have to have permission, i.e., you have to have an address, i.e., there has to be a filter. There is a filter. So this is email, text, your mobile device, your social news feeds, all these different things.
It's a much more coveted landscape as well, because that permission is a kind of absolution that consumer's giving to that brand. So come on in and cohabitate with me.
Yeah, and I don't think it's as coveted as we may think. I think it's not as coveted because I'm gonna engage with lots of things, right? I have likes. I mean, I don't know how many likes the average person has in terms of pages they like, or things they like. But I like a lot of shit, and I like doing a lot of stuff. So I engage in all these different groups. What I think we need to realize is these media channels are engaging, and these algorithms are looking for engagement. That's their sole optimization. So when that happens, we have to realize that, yes, you're going to need to have a lot of experiences, but only a contextual experience delivered is going to make it through at that right time, because that filter is going to optimize for momentary engagement. What you want this moment is different from the next, and they're only going to show and let those things through unless you're literally picking up that phone or direct messaging that person in a one-to-one direct channel that is reliable. All these things are going to be filtered out. So I don't think that we're going to see consumers saying this is too much, for the simple fact that these filters will manage that for them.
Got it.
Right? We say email's too much because we see every email, because that's the whole point. We get to filter it out. It's filtered with spam, and then we do the next layer of filtering.
Right.
That's not how these feed systems work. These feed systems, we don't see the stuff that doesn't make it into the feed. And you got to remember, like Facebook tells you, every time you log on to Facebook, there are 1,000 posts waiting for you. They don't show them to you, and they don't show you the ones that aren't shown. They just go into the abyss.
So what you're saying is that with these innate filters that the platforms are giving us, we're going to be accepting that landscape again and again, because we're not getting awash with all this. There is a what do you want to say, there's going to be
the filters are regulating themselves, right? So you got to think about who has the financial interest on those mediums, and it's the medium itself, right? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You pick your medium, and it doesn't have to necessarily be social,
right?
But those filters, when they say they're optimizing for engagement, they know what that means, and so they're using their algorithms to say, how do I keep this person engaged in a positive direction for the longest amount of time? These algorithms are so specific and so advanced, they can change your mood. I don't know. I mean, if you go back to that study that Facebook ran when they went into hot water, this is completely true. So Facebook runs this study, and what they do is they decide to check to see if by altering your feed, if they can physically change your mental state.
We were all lab rats.
And they found they could. Yes, they found we could.
Absolutely.
And so they got in a lot of hot water for that. But the point was made that, they have so much power with these algorithms that they can actually change your mood, right? It's not that it's that the algorithm can figure out your mood, can then know how to then change that for optimal engagement with different content. And it's not by manipulating content, it's by manipulating when you see it, what you see, and what you don't see. So I think these filters, it's in their best interest to not let those systems become burdensome to the to the people in those networks. Because if they do, then there's not going to be those people. Hence, their financial interests are compromised.
So it's never going to end. That's what you're telling me.
No, it's not going to end. It won't ever.
It's just going to get smarter and smarter, and our consumption patterns and our expectations are going to be just that more refined. So that leads you to the additional that logical step, logical point is that businesses cannot wait any longer to jump into this and utilize the marketing automation tools, utilizing the real-time interaction models, because it's just going to continue. And the further you are away from that adoption, the more critical it is. And honestly, you're going to be putting yourselves out of business, right?
Oh, 100%. And I don't want to, I mean, you mentioned tools and advanced tools. And yes, that is a very critical piece, but that is not the critical piece. So we did a study last year, which was, it's the state of marketing, I believe it's 2016 from Salesforce Research. The point of this study was to determine the single factors which differentiate a high-performing marketing organization from an underperforming marketing organization. Tools were not the number one thing. The number one thing was executive buy-in to a new idea in marketing. Only if there is an executive buy-in to not what they think marketing is. If they just think they need marketing, they do not have a buy-in to what they should. They need to understand there is a new definition and idea of what marketing is, and it needs to be funded differently. It's got a very different budgetary structure. It has a very different role and scope inside the organization. Its function is very different.
Right.
And unless that is understood at the highest levels, even technology adoption can only take you so far. You're still not going to be able to reap the rewards that others are out of those same technologies, because you're approaching it essentially with a very dated model. You're trying to put that into a new game and play it with old rules.
Got it.
So you've got to first off do that. And so that's kind of what I would say is the biggest thing, but that's also very hard. And so a lot of people can back their way into that. You know, they can ask for a small budgetary, line item, get these tools, prove out these tools, and then step by step, if they're having to fight really hard against the executives, they can go step by step and prove their methods. But the second has to be reached. Tools won't get you there by itself.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a blowtorch of information there, and I hope you didn't give away too much with your book. So the book,
do you have a title for your book yet?
The working title, I think, is Context Revolution, but it's working at this point. So.
Well, there's a wealth of information coming out of this guy, Tom.
Yeah, I
know. We would certainly love to have you come back and talk about a number of different topics. Where can we find you on the speaker circuit? You're certainly moving and shaking all the time. What do you have queued up this year?
Yeah, this year I'm slowing down a little bit just due to the work on the book. I'm doing a speech out in Sweden. It's a big event called I think it's called Golden Key. Now that's definitely however you pronounce that in Swedish. But I think the headliner is Edward Snowden, and there's a couple of other of us speaking at that conference. And then there's
wow.
Yeah, I was a little humble. I was like, wait a second, I might get to see this mythical man. My brother-in-law was like, make sure you get an autograph for your brother. I was like, all right, we'll do.
That's pretty darn cool.
Yeah, security nerd. Then there's another one I'm doing for a bank social conference up in New York. And then it's kind of light here and there, but mostly it'll just be heads down this year writing. Yeah, I traveled way too much over the past couple of years, and I'm going to kind of slim that back and work more on the writing effort this year to get this book really dialed in.
Very cool. Well, we're certainly going to be looking forward towards that publishing, and we're also obviously your book that's out there, Marketing Automation for Dummies. Check that out. I haven't read it yet, but we also have another author that's regularly on the show that's done a dummy book. Can you give us some key thoughts that you delivered in that book?
Yeah, so the key thing on that book, so Wiley asked me to help write that book. So I was one of the really early employees of a company called Pardot. Which was sold to ExactTarget and then Salesforce. So really one of the things that why I was asked to write that book and what that book is, first off, it's kind of a misnomer on that book. It is entry level, but only an entry level to get you into the idea frame. It's not just to say, here's how you run a marketing automation tool. What the point of it is to change how you think about marketing to fit within the confines of marketing automation. That's really the main goal of that book.
Got it.
A really good example of that is to think that most people have this idea, they expect to pick up this book and then to go build a lead nurturing program. And I would say that's a good idea and the right step. Now, let me tell you how to do that, right? So first thing you need to realize is that one lead nurturing program cannot do the following. It cannot take somebody from downloading a white paper and turn them into a sales-ready lead. You cannot make that the goal of a lead nurturing program. It's the wrong goal, right? And so what you need to do is understand that there are a series of questions that people are going to be asking. And the goal of the lead nurturing program should be to move somebody from one set of questions to the next set of questions.
Right.
And that should be your defined goal for a nurturing. So you would actually have multiples moving somebody towards a sales-ready state. Then that rolls backwards into content. Well, if your content's not tailored to these stages, if you don't know what these stages are, so those are some of the ideas. Other ideas are then to think of nurturing campaigns such as plays, such as, well, if we have this play, what program or what tactic inside of nurturing can we use to get to that end goal? And so then I break down a bunch of different what I call nurturing plays inside of that, and then help teach you how to kind of recombine those into much larger networks, and then how to build them essentially without killing yourself. The number one problem so I've worked with thousands of people at this point in my life to get marketing automation up and going in their organizations. Thousands may be a little bit hubris, but it's a lot, definitely.
It feels
but,
like
yeah, it feels like that way. I think it's like 10 years I've been with this company now. So, 100 a year, that's doable. That's 1,000. So anywho, if the point I was trying to make is that if you think about these things in those stage-based ways and it makes those plays repeatable, it's just kind of a really much easier way. I really lost the train of thought I was thinking about.
No, it's all right. No. Don't worry about it. Hey, I live and breathe in those spaces. So. No, it's fantastic. We're absolutely going to pick up that book and read it. It does sound that this is not, it's a misnomer of the title. It's not a dummy's book. It literally is the concept, the framework of how you're supposed to deliver your content at different points of the consumer's journey.
Yeah, it's the first and still to this day, I think, best book on the topic of automation in terms of getting people to see it not as a tool, but a different mindset of marketing.
Very cool.
I mean, that's really what I tried to do with that book on that one. And,
And you can certainly get that on Amazon?
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. I think it's on Kindle.
Oh, cool.
I don't get any royalties from it. They all go to the Salesforce Foundation. So feel like you're doing a good deed when you read that book.
Awesome.
But yeah, so hopefully that'll help out.
Excellent. All right. So you're going to be speaking a little bit lightly this year, but you do have a new book coming out. And is it 2018? Not this year, but the next year?
Yeah, it'll be coming out in early 2018.
Cool.
That's the projected date right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, there was one thing I wanted to touch on, but I don't unfortunately have time to do it this show, but I want to get you back on the show. And that has to do with agile marketing.
I'll talk about that for hours.
Oh, I know. And I'm going to have to ask you to if we can book another one here soon, because we are actually adopting in our organization the agile marketing methodology, and I would love to unpack your brain on that one.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Sweet. We will be in touch.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Well, Matt, any final words for the digital marketer listeners that are listening to the show here today?
No, man. Be good and read books.
Read. Make sure you got the foundations before ever trying to get in there. And for the new marketers, there's an incredible amount of authors that have paved the way. Yeah. Stand on those shoulders. Just don't do what you're told to do.
Here, I'll even take it a step further. I made a slide deck, and it's on SlideShare. So if you just Google 103 genuine thought leaders, it will pull up a curated list that me and a group of thought leaders put together of who are the people that you should be listening to, following, and then what 6 books really you should read to understand the foundations of modern marketing.
Absolutely.
So if you kind of check that, just Google 103 genuine thought leaders, and it'll pop right up, and you can watch the whole thing.
Yeah, we're actually going to have that on the link on the Edge. In fact, I was just sharing that with the entire staff. We've actually interviewed a number of those individuals in there, but boy, that was a great list to go through. So, Matt, thank you so much for putting that list together. But thanks for being on the show. You have an incredible insight into the B2B, B2C community, but more importantly, what real time and what consumers are looking for from brands. Companies have to step up the plate and realize that this also goes far beyond marketing. It goes into sales cycles and business logistics as well. So, I mean, it's not just a new medium. This is a new communication environment that we find ourselves in, right?
Correct.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, sir. We do have to jump on out of here, but we're going to be following you and asking you a few questions of you down the way. Thanks so much for your time.
No worries, guys. Have a great day.
Take care. Have fun. Have a great East Coast evening.
And tell Edward Snowden hi. He's a big fan of the show.
Will do.
He's a big fan of the show. All right. Thanks so much, sir.